Dar zamane Shah Abbas, Dar zamane Shah Abbas. In the time of the reign of the great king Shah Abbas, there lived in the city of Ardabil an old man whose wife had left him many years before, leaving only with him his beautiful daughter Sepide, who lived with him. An old man who never had any luck in business, never had any luck in life. And one evening this man was walking alone, looking up at a sky scattered with stars. He looked up to that sky and he sighed to himself. Asemanaman yeksitere ham nadarad. In this sky there are countless stars, and yet there is not a single star in my own sky. Asemaneman yeksitere ham nadarad. But then he heard behind him a strange sound. Psst, psst. When he turned around, he saw there was someone who was trying to get his attention. And in the moonlight he saw who it was. A dervish, a wandering Sufi, with his cone-like hat and his cloak of black wool and his wooden begging bowl and that ram's horn that hung around his neck by a leather strap. And the dervish started speaking with him. Aga, sir, come with me. Come with me and we will build a road from the known to the unknown. Well, the old man looked at the dervish and he only shook his head and he said, Shab Bekhair, a good evening to you. Now I must return home. But the dervish wouldn't leave him alone. He approached the old man again and said, Aga, sir, come, let us build a ladder with the branches of the brushwood tree. Well, the old man had had enough of the dervish. So he grabbed the dervish by the sleeve and dragged him to the park that surrounded his masjid, his mosque. And when they arrived there, he motioned the dervish to one of the trees and he said, My good man, why don't you sleep under that tree? That will be your shelter for this evening. And without a further word, he left the dervish alone in that garden, in that park surrounding the mosque. And he returned home. And as he walked through the door, there was his lovely daughter Sepide, setting at the table two bowls steaming with eshkene chorme, steaming with meat broth, their dinner that evening. And as he sat down with his daughter to dinner, he explained to his daughter the strange encounter he had with that dervish just a few moments before, and the strange things that were told to him. Well, Sepide listened very carefully. And when her father finished speaking, she turned to him and she said, Pedaram, my dear father, how could you leave that man alone in the garden? Don't you understand what he was trying to say to you? When he was saying to you, let us build a ladder together, he was trying to say to you that he was inviting you for a conversation. For if the rungs of the ladder are the topics of conversation, the ladder is the very conversation itself. And when that dervish told you to help him build a road from the known to the unknown, he was only inviting you to get to know him. For to get to know a stranger, is it not like a road leading from the known to the unknown? Pedaram, my dear father, go back and bring that man to our table so he could share our eshkene chorme with us. Well, at once the old man shrugged his shoulders, went to the garden, to the park where he left the dervish, and led him back home. And soon there were three sitting at that table. And as they finished their dinner, the old man turned to the Darvish, and he explained to him what his daughter had told him. Well, the Darvish listened very carefully. And then he turned to the old man and he said, Aga, sir, indeed you have a very clever daughter. A daughter who would be indeed a wonderful wife to the lucky man that would marry her. And so I ask you tonight your permission to have the hand in marriage of your daughter. The old man couldn't believe what he was hearing. He was expecting this Darvish to take his own daughter. And so he turned to the Darvish, looked him right in the eye, and he said, I have had a life filled with misfortune. Do you think I want to even impose more misfortune on my daughter by marrying the likes of you? Well, the Darvish looked back at the old man, and he didn't show the slightest sign of being offended by the old man's harsh words. He only began to laugh. Aga, sir, is that after all that worries you? Come with me, but bring a shovel, and we will go to that garden, that park where you left me, right near the mosque. And so the Darvish stood up and led the old man who was carrying his shovel, led him all the way to that very spot where the old man had left him earlier that evening. And then the Darvish told the old man to dig at the foot of the very tree the old man suggested that Darvish sleep under. And he dug and dug until his shovel hit something hard. For at the foot of the tree buried was a box, an iron box. And when he lifted the box above ground and he opened the lid, he saw that box was filled with jewels, diamonds and emeralds and rubies, more riches than the old man had ever seen in his life. Aga, sir, said the Darvish, would this be enough of a dowry? Would this be enough of a dowry for you to allow me to marry your daughter? Of course, this changed everything. Of course, the man was more than pleased to offer the hand in marriage of his daughter to this Darvish. And so the two got married. And the evening of their marriage, before the sun rose the next day, the Darvish showed a golden clasp, a golden arm clasp, to his new wife, Sepide. And he said this to her, my love, if we have a daughter, I want you to take this golden arm clasp and braid her hair with it. But if we have a son, I want him to wear this golden arm clasp on his arm, proudly as a sign of his own father. Well, the next day, the Darvish took leave of Sepide, his new wife, and never saw her ever again. And then some time afterwards, Sepide gave birth to her child. It was a son, a beautiful baby boy, who grew to be a very handsome young man, taller than his peers, more clever, more energetic, more brave. And yet there was one thing that always set him apart from his peers, and that was that he did not know his own father. And his peers did not make him forget it. For in everything he excelled before he could even brag of his success. There were his chums, the boys in the street who jeered at him. Very well for you, Jahangir, for that was the name of the young man. Very well for you, Jahangir, but you don't even know your own father. How often did he hear those cutting words? Until a day came when he could not bear it any longer. So he went to his mother, and for the first time in his life, he asked a question he never dared ask before. Madaram, my mother, he said to her, you have been silent about one thing, and now I want to know. Who is my father? Well, Sepide looked at her son. Her son who was already on the threshold of adulthood, and she knew she could no longer hide behind that question. And so she went away, took something from a chest at the farthest corner of her closet. And that thing was that gold clasp that was given to her many years before. This is all that is left, she said to him. This is all that is left of your father, and now it is time to give it to you. Well, the young man looked at that clasp, and he knew that from that clasp there must have been someone who would have given it to his mother. And so there was nothing else to do. Nothing else to do except look for that person. Look for that one who gave that gift to his mother many years ago. There was nothing left else to do except to look for his own father. But where to find him? The world was such a big place. But then he heard of a place called Esfahan, a great city called Esfahan, whom everyone in the world called Nesfejahan, half the world. And he said to himself, if my father is to be found somewhere, I will begin to search for him in that first half of the world they call Esfahan, Nesfejahan. And so that evening, the young man began that long journey by foot from Ardabil all the way to the great city of Esfahan, half the world. The journey took many days, many weeks, days where he did not eat, nights when he was so thirsty and there was no place to find water. And then there came one evening where he tried to sleep in the middle of the wilderness with all the terrors of the night surrounding him. And as he slept, he had lost so much hope he was hoping that evening was his last. But that evening he had a dream. And in his dream, he heard a voice say this to him. Come, let us build a ladder. Let us build a ladder from the branches of the brushwood tree. And in his dream, the young man Jahangir replied, yes, and may this ladder be a conversation between me and you. To which the voice replied, Bale, yes. And then the voice spoke again, Come, let us build a road from the known to the unknown. To which the young man replied in his dream, Yes, let us do so, for I so want to know you. And may this ladder be the way in which I climb over that wall which separates me and you. To which the voice replied, Bale, yes, yes. And with those words, the young man woke up from his dream, and his courage returned to him. And after some more days of travel, finally he arrived in that place that everyone called half the world. He arrived in that great city of Esfahan. But he had no money. He had no home. So he knew the very first thing he had to do was to find some kind of livelihood. And so he walked into the first establishment that he found on his path. It was a chaikhane. It was a tea house. And at once he presented himself to its proprietor. And the proprietor saw the eagerness of the young man who was ready to do anything. And so at once the proprietor hired him. And he did everything that was needed in the tea house. The evening when it was open and the patrons were welcomed in, it was Jahangir who welcomed them the first, welcoming everyone with the same graciousness, be they prince or commoner. And soon he was the one that served the tea to all the guests who gathered there every evening. And the way he prepared his tea was so perfect. He began to develop a reputation of being the greatest tea server in that tea house. Everyone who received a tea served by him always exclaimed, Labsouz, labrise, labdouz. How this young man served tea, so perfectly pour that it filled the brim of the cup. How perfectly this young man served tea so hot it burnt the lip. How perfectly this young man served tea so full-bodied it bit the palate. Labsouz, labrise, labdouz. How many times people exclaimed that to him as he served his tea so perfectly on that silver tray to all the guests who gathered at that tea house every evening. Well, soon he developed such a reputation that everyone in the town tried to find a way to make themselves appear at that tea house so they could see for themselves this wonder everyone called Jahangir Aga, master of the tea house. Well, very soon, night after night, crowds gathered at that very tea house, some waiting in line to be allowed to enter. And among the many who gathered there was a shy young page boy who always looked at a distance, his back against the wall, seeing Jahangir Aga, master of the tea house, serving so graciously, so perfectly, his tea, time after time after time. Now one evening, when Jahangir was leaving the tea house to close it up for the evening, and he was walking down the street to return to his lodgings, he heard behind him, psst, psst. And when he turned around, he saw that handsome page boy that was motioning him to come closer as the page boy entered an alley. And Jahangir entered the alley, and he felt the arms of the page boy encircle his waist as the page boy pressed himself towards him. At first, Jahangir did not know what to make of this. But when he came closer to the page boy, he discovered that, after all, she was a woman. And she whispered in his ear, "Jahangir, my love, since the first time I saw you in that tea house, my heart has been consumed for you. My name is Shabnam, and I am the daughter of the vizier. And you and no other will be my husband." And so that evening they spent together, Jahangir and Shabnam. And this happened every evening after that. As he was closing up the shop, the tea house, there she was waiting for him. Now this had happened for many days. And yet Shabnam did not realize that at that same tea house was her own father, the vizier, himself in a disguise. And he saw full well what was going on. And he became so enraged that one day he brought this matter before the king, Shah Abbas himself. "You see, your majesty, my daughter is being dishonored by everyone they call Jahangir Aga, master of the tea house. He must be punished. Well, Shah Abbas was indeed intrigued at this story. So one evening he appeared himself with the vizier, both of them in disguise, so the king could see for himself what was going on. And lo and behold, it was as the vizier had told him. And so, that morning, as Jahangir woke up, how surprised he was to find at his door there were two guards of Shah Abbas himself, who threw chains over him and led him before the king. And before he knew it, Jahangir was before the great Shah Abbas. Shah Abbas with his blue eyes looking sternly at him. "We know what you are up to, young man," said the king. "And now it is the time to suffer your punishment. Raise your arms so we can beat you with clubs." Well, Jahangir began to shake with fear. And very tentatively he raised his arms, and they shook so much that the sleeves came down. And the guards were just about to raise their batons as they were going to beat this young man to a pulp. And just as one of them was about to do the first strike, all of a sudden everyone heard, "Stop!" The cry came from Shah Abbas himself. He looked with his blue eyes at the young man, but those blue eyes had softened with something that seemed to be tears. "Young man," he said, "where did you get that gold clasp that you wear on your arm?" And Jahangir, who was trembling, tried to explain that it was his mother who gave it to him. And then the king began to weep. Young man, don't you understand that after all, it is I who am your father?" In that moment, Jahangir understood that in this half of the world, he had found what he had been seeking for so long. And so from that day, Jahangir entered the household of the great king Shah Abbas. And from that day, he understood that Jahangir Aga was no more, but he was rather the son of a king. And from that day, he would live as a prince in his father's court. Bala raftim mast bud, pain amadim doch bud, geseye ma dorok bud. Like yogurt is from milk, and old was once new. Many lies I have told you, which in the telling come true.